clock has started. Yes, sir. Reading you loud and clear.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
Discovery, roger, there, Bravo.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome to the September 26th edition, 2018, of the Space News. This is Peter Howard, and once again I have Michael Abdullah and Angela De Grazia with me from the Space Association of Australia. Gentlemen, good evening.
G'day, Peter. How you going?
G'day, guys. How are you?
All right, we're going to start in Australia. A lot of stuff happening in Australia. The Northern Territory's space industry is ready for takeoff, or is it a pie in the sky? Well, the stars appear to be aligning for the Northern Territory's nascent space industry. Global trends and national level changes could soon draw others to the region in a bid to tap into the $400 billion international space industry. Less than 3 months ago, the Australian Space Agency was launched, bringing the nation up to speed with almost every other developed country in the world. A key piece of legislation governing space activities has also been overhauled to better accommodate the private sector companies that now make up 76% of the global industry. At the same time, the Northern Territory government is working to facilitate space industry businesses, with one company in the process of building the nation's first launch site in Arnhem Land. While astronauts, rockets and multi-billion-dollar NASA programs still underpin many perceptions of the space industry, it's small satellite technology that Equatorial Launch Australia hopes to bring at least a $100 million benefit to the NT economy once its planned Nullarbor spaceport is operational. This type of technology is now able to launch satellites into space for less than $1 million, making the space industry accessible to far broader range of participants. And still on Australian space news, Australian Space Agency has been recognised in the United States. The Australian government's establishment of the Australian Space Agency has been commended in a resolution introduced to the United States House of Representatives earlier this month. Minister for Industry, Science and Technology, Karen Andrews, welcomed the resolution and said the Space Agency will help drive the growth of our space industry, create new opportunities for businesses and create jobs. The resolution recognises the long history and partnership Australia and the United States share in the space and the value of ongoing cooperation between our two countries, Minister Andrews said. Minister Andrews told Parliament the Australian Space Agency will help the space sector to create 20,000 new jobs with opportunities for businesses and new technology to support our farmers, logistics, transport and mining companies. Excitingly, the Australian Space Agency will inspire our young people not just to dream of becoming an astronaut, but to appreciate the importance of studying STEM and understanding the opportunities it can lead to. In addition to creating the Space Agency, the 2018-19 budget invested $260 million to grow Australia's world-leading satellite infrastructure. Angela, what's happening?
Okay, we go to the International Space Station. As reported at last week's Space News, an upcoming International Space Station spacewalk will inspect a hole found in a Soyuz spacecraft docked there. Roscosmos said cosmonauts will inspect the hole during a November 15 spacewalk, one of several tasks planned during the EVA. Roscosmos is continuing the investigation into the cause of the hole and expects that work to wrap up by the end of November. Meanwhile, a Russian official claims that NASA wants to extend operations of the International Space Station through to at least 2028. Oleg Kotov, Deputy Director of the Institute of Biomedical Problems under the Russian Academy of Sciences, said in an interview that NASA had already initiated prolongation of the station's operations till 28 to 30, and this work is already in progress. However, he didn't elaborate on the source of that claim. NASA announced as part of its 2019 budget request that it would seek to end direct funding of the ISS in the mid-20s as part of a transition to commercial providers. Moving on to commercial crew. The two companies developing commercial crew vehicles believe their spacecraft can now meet a key NASA safety threshold. During a panel discussion at the AIAA Space Forum last week, Boeing and SpaceX officials said they now think that their vehicles can meet standards like a 1 in 270 loss of crew requirement NASA established for the program. NASA's Commercial Crew Program Manager, Kathy Lauders, said the agency was still reviewing the company's analysis. The companies are gearing up for uncrewed test flights planned for later this year or early next year, which will be followed by crewed test flights in the northern spring and summer of 2019. Michael.
Okay, let's look at NASA Lunar and Planetary. Images from a NASA spacecraft show that the dwarf planet Ceres has hosted dozens of ice volcanoes over its history. Scientists found one cryovolcano, which erupts water ice rather than molten rock, in images from the Dawn spacecraft. A closer analysis of images of the surface, though, turned up faint traces of the remnants of past cryovolcanoes that have since slumped and spread out. Those volcanoes should release about 10,000 cubic metres of water ice a year, thousands of times less than the amount of molten rock released by Earth's volcanoes. Meanwhile, an unidentified glitch is keeping NASA's Curiosity rover from transmitting science data. In a statement last week, project officials said that this issue prevents the rover from transmitting the scientific data it's collected, but is not impairing other rover operations, including real-time telemetry transmissions. Controllers are collecting more engineering data from the rover to diagnose the problem and don't have an estimate for when it will be resolved. NASA's newest exoplanet Hunter has bagged its first world. Scientists using images from the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, or TESS, have found a super-Earth exoplanet orbiting the star Pi Mensae, 59.5 light-years from Earth. The planet, nearly 5 times the mass of the Earth, orbits 50 times closer to its star than Mercury does from the Sun. The astronomer who led the group who found it speculates that the planet may be evaporating from the intense radiation it gets orbiting so close to its star. Peter.
All right, let's move over to China. China expects a first launch of its heavy-lift Long March 9 rocket in a decade. An official of the Chinese National Space Administration said last week that the rocket, more than 90 metres tall and 10 metres in diameter, is expected to make its first launch in 2028. The Long March 9 will be able to place 140 tonnes into low Earth orbit, slightly more than the upgraded Block 2 version of NASA's Space Launch System. Meanwhile, a Chinese organisation has unveiled a model of a Long March rocket with a reusable first stage. The Shanghai Academy of Spaceflight Technology, a subsidiary of China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, put a model of Long March 6X rocket on display at a Chinese conference last week. The rocket is a version of the Long March 6 featuring the first stage equipped with landing legs for vertical powered landing, just like SpaceX's Falcon 9. The Shanghai Academy of Spaceflight Technology says the rocket, whose first flight is planned for 2021, should be able to reduce the launch costs by 30%.
Oh, it also has grid fins.
Is that right? Wow.
All right, let's talk commercial space. The Israeli company building a lunar lander for a former Google Lunar X Prize team sees opportunity for doing similar spacecraft in the future. IAI is wrapping up work on the SpaceIL lunar lander, scheduled to launch around the end of the year as a secondary payload on a Falcon 9. The lander was originally intended as a one-off mission as part of an effort to stimulate interest in science and engineering in Israel. However, AIA says it now sees some business in going to the moon, using versions of the that lander for other unidentified customers. It just so happens I'll be the first cab off the rank, really, for the series of moon invasions that are about to start. So it'd be great to see. Meanwhile, a British satellite has successfully demonstrated the use of a net to capture space debris. The Remove Debris satellite first deployed a CubeSat and then fired a net developed by Airbus at the CubeSat. The net wrapped up the CubeSat in a test that the Surrey Space Centre, which developed the spacecraft, called a success. Remove Debris was deployed from the International Space Station to test orbital debris capture technologies, which include a harpoon as well. Amazing stuff, all like science fiction, isn't it? We go across to SpaceX. As announced on last week's edition of Space News, SpaceX announced last Monday night that a Japanese billionaire has purchased a flight of the company's Big Falcon rocket for a trip around the moon, carrying a group of artists. Elon Musk revealed that Yusaku Maezawa, a 42-year-old former punk rock musician who became a fashion entrepreneur and art collector and is now worth $2.9 billion, will buy the flight for an undisclosed sum. Maezawa said he planned to fly on the mission along with 6 to 8 artists through a project called Dear Moon, in the hope that such a trip will inspire them to create new works of art. That mission is scheduled for launch in 2023, a schedule Musk said depends on everything going right in the development. Musk also disclosed some design changes to the Big Falcon rocket spaceship, including revised fins and different engine configurations, as well as increased payload volume. Going to his competitor, Blue Origin. Jeff Bezos said he will continue investing billions of dollars into his space company, Blue Origin. Speaking at the Air Forces Association conference last week, Bezos said he plans to spend just over $1 billion next year in the development of Blue Origin's New Glenn launch vehicle. He said he had already invested $1 billion in the development of the Florida factory where the rocket will be built and its launch pad at Cape Canaveral. He also discussed the importance of space dominance for the US amid changing threats, and that the US has to be able to go to space more frequently with less lead time. Northrop Grumman remains confident it will win an Air Force funding to continue development of its expendable launch vehicle or evolved expendable launch vehicle class rocket. The company is awaiting news if it will get one of several launch services agreement awards from the Air Force to fund development of its Omega rocket. A company executive said last week that he is optimistic that the company will get one of those agreements, which are expected to be announced in the near future. Northrop is competing with Blue Origin, SpaceX, and United Launch Alliance, all the usual suspects. Meanwhile, Northrop Grumman carried out a successful test last week of a new strap-on booster for the Atlas V. The company carried out the static fire test of the solid fuel GEM 63 booster at a Utah test site, the first of 2 qualification tests planned. ULA plans to start using the GEM 63 boosters on an Atlas V mission for the Air Force in the mid-2019, replacing similar boosters that had been manufactured by Aerojet Rocketdyne. Peter.
Fantastic. Well, to finish off this week, if you've just wanted to get your own spacecraft, we can help you there. Sierra Nevada Corporation's Dream Chaser will soon be available for purchase in Matchbox form. The company announced last week that Mattel will be producing a version of the spaceplane as part of its Skybusters line of toy aeroplanes and spacecraft. The Matchbox Dream Chaser, modelled after the designed Sierra Nevada developed for the Commercial Crew program, will be available in stores very soon, actually this month. So there you go.
Beauty. I'll have my order in, Mike and Pete.
All the space geeks will be happy there.
Absolutely.
And just in time for Christmas. All right, well, gents, thank you very much. That's all for this week's Space News, and it's back to you, Andrew.